We are following breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. Former Cowboys quarterback Andy Dalton officially heading to the Chicago Bears. Our NFL insider Jason Lockenfor confirming the news. It is a one-year, $10 million deal with up to $3 million in incentives. Now, the Bears have been dealing with a quarterback conundrum, looking for a long-term solution. Many thinking they may try to land Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, instead signing Andy Dalton. Welcome in, NFL insider Jonathan Jones. Our colleague Joe Musso is a Bears fan. He says he is dizzy with rage as of right now. Jonathan Jones, what do you think about this? Or were the Bears not necessarily thinking at all? What's the thoughts process here?
Well, I mean, if you're Joe or any rational Bears fan, what do you want the Bears to do? Because I don't think they're getting Russell Wilson, and I don't think they're getting Deshaun Watson. So they have Nick Foles on the roster. They're not bringing back Mitch Trubisky. You want them to trade for Sam Darnold? I don't know really what else you want. The Andy Dalton move there to Chicago makes sense in that regard. And if he plays a little bit better than he did last season, then that's a pretty decent deal. 1 year, $10 million. That's a very affordable contract for a guy like Andy Dalton, who does have the potential, again, to play better than he did last year. So, but even if a Deshaun or a Russell were to be available to the Chicago Bears, this is not a contract that precludes the Chicago Bears from making a move to get one of those two guys. It's hard for me to imagine that Andy Dalton is going to lead the Chicago Bears to a postseason berth, but Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles were able to do it this past season. They at least made it to the playoffs, but they made it to the playoffs in the same way that I went to Harvard. You know, I went to the bookstore at Harvard. They went to the playoffs and then got absolutely annihilated by the Saints and looked completely inept on offense. So good for them. Maybe Andy Dalton can do the same, but I don't see this Bears team at all competing for an NFC North title and certainly not for an NFC title.
So let me ask you this. Is this the only quarterback move that we see the Bears make before next season? Are we looking at a competition with Foles and Dalton? Are they looking to the draft? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I certainly think that there's going to be a competition between those two. And I would put my money among all the options that are out there. I think the highest percentage chance is that in training camp, this is another quarterback competition between Nick Foles and this time Andy Dalton. They can absolutely spend a draft pick, and if they like a guy in the second or third round, because they're not going to be in a position to get any of the guys there in the first round who are worthy of first round picks, then okay, go ahead and have that guy. He's going to get the third team reps. Again, I've never really thought that Russell Wilson was going to wind up in Chicago because they really didn't have a quarterback that they would give to Seattle, that Seattle would want. Now, maybe Seattle likes Andy Dalton, and this just better positions the Chicago Bears to get Russell Wilson. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. I think that Andy Dalton is there for the 2021 season. And, you know, Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are more or less rolling the dice on putting together and fielding a competitive team, a competitive Chicago Bears, and what could very well be their last season there in Chicago.
So if you're a Bears fan right now and you're like, I want a quarterback, I want a good quarterback, I want a long-term solution at quarterback, what are you telling those fans?
Well, you shouldn't have gotten your hopes up for Deshaun or Russell. I mean, you never heard from me that these were realistic scenarios. So I've lived here with both feet on the ground on earth. So you should have considered what the real options were. And the real options were what the Washington football team, for example, just went through. It's a Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's a trading for a Sam Darnold. It's maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo. It's you know, trading for a Marcus Mariota. It's Andy Dalton. I mean, that's what it is. Teddy Bridgewater, if you want him. I mean, you want an All-Pro or you know, a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson. It has not made sense to me. I don't think that it is going to happen, but listen, we're surprised every year by a trade, by a release. We were surprised today by a release of what some would call one of the best pass blocking centers in the game for the last several years in Rodney Hudson and the Las Vegas Raiders. So anything can happen in the NFL, but again, if I had to put my money on something, I would say that it's probably going to be Dalton and Foles battling it out in late July.
JJ, we're going to get to Deshaun Watson here in a second because there is some news somewhat surrounding him going on right now. But in regards to Russell Wilson, if Chicago's not the team, is there another team besides the Seahawks where you see him potentially landing?
Well, is he going to go to Vegas where who knows what that offensive line is? You know, he's obviously not going to Dallas. You know, I never, it's hard for me with Russ and whatever his demands or non-demands were with the Seattle Seahawks. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Oh, he wants more input in the offense. Oh, okay. They went out and got you some weapons, and you've gone to the playoffs 8 of 9 years. And the offensive line, while not world beaters, has certainly gotten better over the last couple of years. For him to sort of demean the guys who have been up in front of him, I was texting with one player agent earlier today who said, yeah, not a real smart move to hurt the business interests of the guys up there who are supposed to be protecting you. So I never got what Russell was doing. I've said it on here before. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And it still doesn't really today. It never seemed like he was ever going to get out of Seattle. If he wanted out of Seattle, he should have tried a little harder or said something differently. So to me, I've had Russell going back to Seattle for a long time. I don't think today's news really changes that at all. More or less just solidifies what I've considered to be a fact, or at least an eventuality for the last several weeks.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.